And bear with me, I'm going to keep on talking so no one else talks over me.
Put it on Stu's tombstone.
If you want more Draft Zero more often, please consider joining our wonderful cohort of Patreons.
However, this episode in particular is brought to you by ScriptUp.
Our regular listeners know that they are story consultants with industry expertise who don't promise any of that access to market bullshit. Instead, they just want to make your script better via an excellent, thorough report and a awesome, incredibly valuable feedback call.
For me personally, notes help me find script problems, but it's that back and forth discussion that helps me find solutions.
We've used their service and they were really great and helpful.
We've also heard from listeners who sing their praises, not just from the written analysis, but the value of that follow-up call to help diagnose and spitball ideas.
But the best thing that we've been hearing lately is that ScriptUp are really excited when they get scripts from Draft Zero listeners. They say that they're a kind of a cut above. There's a quality to it. Look, personally, I think Chaz and I would love to think that we're helping you become better writers, but I think we're just kind of a byproduct that people listen to us because they want to be better writers. And I think that is actually really reflective why ScriptUp listened to us in the first place. You know, they reached out to us because they are interested in the craft of screenwriting like you.
If you would like 10% off ScriptUp story consultancy services, use the promo code DZ10. Find links and promo code in the show notes. Hi, I'm Chaz Fisher.
And I'm Mel. I've already blown it.
Hi, I'm Chaz Fisher.
And I'm Mel Killingsworth.
And I'm Stu Willis.
And welcome to Draft Zero, a podcast where aspiring filmmakers try to work out what makes great screenplays work.
And in this episode, we are doing the third, I was going to say possibly final, but who the hell knows? We're doing the third part of our series on ensembles or ensemble storytelling. And we are broadly doing a topic that can either be thought of as films whose genres didn't necessarily mean they had to be ensembles, and these films have used ensembles, or you can think of it as films that are using ensembles in more unconventional ways. So our previous episode, part 2, which was great, you should listen to it, looked at more conventional ensemble storytelling and genres that are conventionally ensembles. And in this episode, we are looking at The Woman King, Riders of Justice, and Nope, which all in their own interesting ways have used their ensembles to tell interesting or more unconventional stories. I don't even necessarily think the stories are more unconventional, but they've been able to use the ensembles in unconventional ways to interesting effect.
Yeah, would it be fair to say that, like, last episode we were looking at, all right, your story requires a fuck ton of characters, and here's some tools to find out how to service them. And then this episode is more about, what if you choose to add a fuck ton of characters to your story? What effect does that have on your story?
Yeah.
Or you could also sort of flip it and look at it a little bit the other way of, if you are going to tell X amount of story and address these themes, here's a good way to do that with ensembles. Because I do think, Chaz, you've made the point that a lot of them almost necessitated, not as a genre, but because of the types of themes that they want to address and things that they want to unravel psychologically, the easiest and or best way to do that within their stories was to use ensembles.
Yeah, particularly for Riders of Justice. I'm prepared to be convinced on the other two. I'd also just like to flag that this is the robbed at the Oscars episode. All three of these films should have been crushing it at this year's Oscars.
All right, so speaking of crushing it, shall we introduce our lenses first?
I think in a lot of ways I'm sort of just going to be very boring and basic and sort of go along the same track that I did last episode, which is, how are we introducing these characters in a memorable way that is going to underscore who they are, distinguish them in our minds, and continue to carry that through the remainder of the movie. You know, these people this isn't a television show where you're going to be with them for, 6 seasons in a movie, whatever, right? Like, you're introducing a large number of people that in some cases are going to be on, large battlefields or in the dark or whatever. And you need the audience to be able to easily distinguish them, their wants and needs, who they are, where they are, etc. And so that in introducing them and in continually reminding the audience of their driving force, their characteristics, their, personality, etc. So I think I'll probably just sort of stay along that track and let you guys go a little bit more off the edge, if it were.
Well, I'm going to say mine quickly before Stu does, because Stu has warned us that he has a esoteric academic lecture about to land.
Mm-hmm. I'm loading up the PowerPoint now.
But mine is simply about, like, what if you take a story that the kind of main storyline and the main characters are well established and somewhat, in many ways, conventional, and then add whole other complete stories, because this isn't just about introducing a whole lot of characters to have impacts on the main characters. I think each of these films stand out because they have whole other stories that almost vie for being the quote-unquote main storyline. Not quite, but certainly there are periods of sections of the movie where, of each of these three films, where there is a whole storyline that is not quote unquote necessary for the plot, but it is there. And I want to explore with the two of you what you think, like, obviously, so Mel, you're going to be talking about the impact of that, and Stu, you're going to be talking about other aspects of that, but I want to know what the effect is.
I'm going to jump on that now with a slight digression, because I think ultimately storytelling or art is about what it means, okay? And to me, story is only a means to end, and plot under that is only a means to the end of communicating an experience, and I'm using experience because it's broad, so you can get something like episode 3 of The Last of Us, where we literally break the point of view of our main characters and follow the story of these secondary characters. And some people really responded to that because it's an incredibly thematically and self-contained episode. And there are other people, Ben Shapiro, that were like, this doesn't advance the plot. I don't understand. And they're using the fact that it doesn't advance the plot as an example of like why they think it's shitty. And I'm just like, no, that's just really bad analysis, because instead of starting, what does this mean? You're actually starting with like the mechanics of it.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, that's not what I'm doing.
Oh,
right?
no, I know.
Like,
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you that we make these decisions because of what they mean.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we may not be aware of that. We may be using conventions of particular genres or particular storytelling because we see them in other things that we like. And we're like, oh, this is cool. In the same way that, to use a music metaphor, like a breakdown in like a hardcore punk song, right? It, gets the mosh pit going, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why you do it, right? You probably don't really think about it beyond that, other than the things you like tend to do the same thing. I think that's important because, and this is going to lead me to my bigger rant, that we're talking about genres whose conventions require an ensemble. So if you're working out who your cast of characters is to be in that ensemble, you've got a lot of reference points for the function of those characters. Right? So you've got a detective, you have the victim, you probably have two victims, you have suspects, you've got the suspect that actually did it, right? These are functions of the character. But when you're trying to do something that's a little bit more unconventional as a writer, part of what you're going to be thinking about is, what is the purpose of having this character in this story? And we're connecting it to theme, but I'm going to connect it a little bit more to drama. Okay, so one of the functions that a character has or gives us is the point of view.
Yeah.
The character whose eyes we're seeing a scene from, okay? That is not necessarily the protagonist, right? It can be the protagonist, but it is a separate and discrete function.
Yeah. We'll be able to talk through each of the films about what the effect of the characters are on the other characters. Mm-hmm. Well, shall we summarize The Woman King then?
Yeah.
An evil is coming that threatens our kingdom, our freedom. But we have a weapon they are not prepared for.
My king, the Europeans wish to conquer us. They will not stop until the whole of Africa is theirs. We must fight back for our people.
Aniska, you are asking me to take them to war. War.
Some things are worth fighting for.
The Woman King is a historical action drama film and definitely does not skimp on the action.
Or the historical.
Or the melodrama.
It's directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, and the credited screenplay writer is Dana Stevens, but story by Maria Bello, which Mel and I have talked about in the past, Maria Bello's involvement. But it's set in a West African kingdom, Dahomey, and it's about like Dahome's individual wars and battles for identity with neighboring empires, the Oyo and the Mahi, I think they are, against the background of European slavery. And it is one of the big overriding moral questions that afflict nearly all the characters in this, is whether it's okay to, whether slavery is kind of acceptable under any conditions. The Dahomey have an army of warrior women, the Agonjie. Forgive my terrible pronunciation if I'm butchering it. And their general is Naniska, who by the end of the movie is nominated by the king to be the woman king, as in accordance with their traditions and religions. And so you could imagine that this story might follow, you know, Naniska's ascendancy to being the woman king, as other historical epics do. But in fact, there is an entirely almost separate storyline of a young girl called Nawi, who in the beginning of the film is given by her father to be trained into an Agonjie, and she has to, by the middle of the film, train to be an Agonjie, and then kind of the rest of the film is her deciding whether that is going to be her path in life.
Yep. It is the biggest ensemble we've literally done 3 series, essentially tackled 9 films, and The Woman King is probably the most sprawling in terms of ensemble, in terms of story, in terms of how many plots they have juggling in the air at once, like plates that are spinning, etc.
What is fantastic about this film is I actually think it really plays with tropes of the historical genre, right? So I would say the 2 primary storylines are absolutely, you say, Niska and then Nawi.
The veteran and the audience surrogate.
Yeah. Either of those things could have been films of their own. But with Nawi's storyline, we also meet another character called Malik at the port which is where the slavers go. And we learn that this character's...
his mother was a Dahomey slave who was taken, but ended up with a presuming colonial Brazilian father. And so he's half Dahomey.
Yeah. So he is the seeming love interest for Nawi, and they definitely play it as a bit of a love storyline. But because we've met him cold, we meet him at like 40 minutes into the film, almost, right?
44 minutes. I paused it to go, this is late.
And it's definitely like the establishing shot of the beach and the port trade, and then we find a boot land, and then we kind of reveal who the boot belongs to. So really tropey. It's one of the many tropes that's kind of playing around with it. You expect this romance between this young girl and this super attractive young man to kind of go somewhere, and they're kind of inverting that expectation, right? Because in many ways, the film is not just about the slave trade, but it's also about the role of women at this particular time, the subjugation of women and the expectation of them, right? So it's playing with our feeling of the expectations. And the advantage of that character as following him and developing him is we actually think he's going to be the one who goes and rescues her, and the film deliberately resists that.
It's a film that with arguably, I mean, you can argue, does it have 8 main characters and 3 tertiary? You can argue it has up to 10 main characters, perhaps. You know, we're talking about ensembles, and this is the biggest ensemble of the 3, for sure.
Probably of all the ones we've looked at, except maybe Pitch Perfect, is the only one that feels like it has this sprawling characteristic.
It has 4 guys who are sort of quote unquote main characters, protagonist, antagonist, whatever, but they are all very intentionally subjugated. Probably not quite the right term, especially considering themes the film is dealing with, but they are not the main interests of the film and of the story it's telling. It is telling the story of these women and the men that they have to deal with, whether that's in a political sense or a romantic sense or an interpersonal sense or you are an asshole and I'm going to kill you sense. It's dealing with all of them in very intentional ways that subverts how they would usually be the 4 leads of a story like this.
And they also impact on each other. Not to the exclusion to say that your summary isn't bang on, Mel, but as I think Stu's going to get into, each of these, 3, 4 main characters, or at least the 2 main storylines, they each have a network of characters servicing their separate stories, and then occasionally swapping over to service the other character's story in a somewhat unconnected web.
It is definitely a really good example of character web, but just to pick up on what Mel said about the presentation of the male characters, like, I think you have kind of like almost 2 A plots and then 2 C plots. Like, weirdly, there's no B plot, as in, you get the general storyline, Nawi's storyline, and then the C plots is the King's storyline and Malik's storyline. So,
which are quite intertwined. They sort of...
Yeah, they are all intertwined, but there is just to say why this film is unconventional, there is a version of this film that either, as we said, focuses exclusively on the general, focuses exclusive on Nawi, or perhaps is like, here is the general, the knight. I'm just going to use a European version. Here is the knight, Sir Lancelot, and he is working for King Arthur, and there is who has ultimately got power, and we would get a lot more access to the king. And what we realized when we talked about this in our pre-recording is that we only ever see the king in context of other people, and it's always through the eyes of the women.
And you've got sort of his wife and this eunuch character who are sort of at war for him, and they're both very jealous of Naniska, but they're both going to use her when she sides with them. But we really only see the king outside of the context of the main storyline of the A plot, in context of one of those characters.
So coming to a specific character function relates to theme, they have chosen that this is a story about the women in this world, and that we only ever see the king through a point of view character that is cis male. That's not necessarily what a eunuch is, but certainly the coding of the character is
queer as fuck.
Yeah. And so that is a choice that they've made that connects to the theme. I just think that's a really good example. Whereas Malik, who's the love interest, a little bit different, and then the antagonist, the villain of the piece, we do get a lot of privilege, but that is in contrast. He is surrounded by men.
Oh, and he's played as that prototypical alpha male to his detriment, very intentionally.
I guess my key question I want to resolve is, what does choosing to tell Nawi's story side by side with Naniska's, and I've got written down the points in where the 2 stories actually interact and touch on each other, but for the most part they do have 2 fairly separate storylines, even though, when spoiler, it turns out that Naniska is Nawi's mother and Naniska gave her up. Even when the 2 characters learn that is the case, it doesn't really seem to impact on their 2 separate, central dramatic questions of what is Naniska prepared to do in order to become the woman king or not, and what path in life is Nawi going to be empowered to choose.
Do you think becoming the woman king is Naniska's goal, her want?
No, but it's definitely the stakes, right?
Maybe of her storyline, but it's the story as a whole, and what that character wants is to free Dahomey from being involved in the slave trade at all.
Yes.
Right? That's her goal, and she's trying to convince the king that they could switch to palm oil, and her absolute goal is that.
To me, it's not ever what she was trying to do. It's just you've got a film called The Woman King. They seed early on this idea that there is the Woman King. You've got her and the Queen vying for who will the king listen to in terms of counsel over the slave trade being their dividing issue. And ultimately, at the end of the film, he's about to choose the Queen to become the Woman King and ends up going back to Naniska.
So it's possibly the central dramatic question for the world rather than the storyline, right?
Yes.
So that's interesting, thinking about there's this A plot line, the general, B plot line, Nawi, but we should also think about, can we create a question for the world so the world can be changed by these characters? Now, in terms of character function, I'm interested in things that are like the character verb. So there's the dramatic function, the point of view character, the initiator, they support. But I'm also very interested in characters and the way that they support this main character. So General Naniska is an initiator, right? We literally see the film very early on has her, rise up out of the long grass and is about to lead the charge. She is the archetypal warrior, which means that her tactics, right, which is kind of like the verbs that she chooses, is violence, right? She uses violence to solve her problems, but smart violence, okay? The film is at pains, I would argue, actually, before I even argue it, What do people think the first act turning point is for the story as a whole?
I think it has a very short first act. I think as soon as Nawi is taken in, then the main, because it's very sequence driven.
Yeah, except actually I think that of the three, I think that Woman King most clearly has 5 acts. Honestly.
It's very sequence driven, but ultimately the world, their situation, the complication, right? If we're going to use the Shakespearean 5-act thing, Mel, the major complication is them picking a fight with the Oyo. Right?
Yeah.
They choose to pick a fight. That is the initiation that kicks the main engine of the story off, where their shit is going to get real bad for them. So the Oyo turn up wanting a tribute from the king and Dahomey and demand to be given some of the warrior women, right?
To make up for your shortcomings, I will accept an addition to the tributes. 40 agoje. Not 2.
And then the king pulls his 2 generals aside and they huddle together and have a conversation that we do not hear. And then the king gives the counter offer.
20 agoji of our choosing. We will march them to Wida and surrender them. And the port remains open for our trade.
Which the opposing general seems to accept.
I will leave Boma to enjoy the feast that you have prepared. In Wida, I will be waiting.
20 women from her ranks look super upset about what she's doing. We feel the pain. At this point, they've gone out of their way to show that Nawi's a bit of a fuck up and that the general doesn't really like her. So the general is throwing her out, right? And then what happens is that they march those 20 women soldiers to the port city to give the opposing general his new tribute. The general marches in and goes, here's your tribute, kicks over this box fucking full of the Oyo's advisors' heads.
These soldiers are not your tribute. This is your tribute.
And they leave. And what's interesting about this is we don't know whose plan it was. It was probably authorized by the king, right? Gizo's probably like, fuck these guys. We're going to stand up to the Oyo. But the way we as an audience experience it is by Viola Davis.
Viola fucking Davis.
By the general, Naniska, initiating it. Right? So it's giving her agency and we see her initiate and start the fight. She's literally starts a fight at that point and starts the larger fight with the Oyo, which becomes the question for most of the quote unquote second act or the middle section of the film, right? Which is, will they, they've started a fight with the Oyo, will they defeat the Oyo?
It's will they defeat the Oyo, but it also becomes this very personal thing about Naniska, which is, it's 2 sides of the same coin, but I love what they do with it. It's not about her triumphing as a general so much as it's her triumphing over her trauma specifically versus the antagonist, which is great.
Because they've made the opposing general of the Oyo one of her many rapists when she was a young woman.
Potentially the main one and the father of her child.
But they've created that complication to give you the feeling that Naniska is compromised, that she's making decisions in relation to getting revenge that may not be the best thing for herself or Dahomey.
And so the general's main confidant is Amenza, right? And so Amenza, in contrast, and this is an important thing, in contrast, she's also a warrior woman, right? But she's a lot more spiritual. She's connected to the gods. She does the nuts, that uses these sacred nuts to be a fortune teller, right?
I mean, the nuts are right. It was one of my favorite lines.
Your nuts were finally right.
Yeah, but that is a function, right? And you'll see this in other films, that truth-telling is a great thing that a character can be, that they're the person that, it's the Cassandra complex. I can see the future, but I'm powerless to stop it. Or I'm the one that can tell you your character flaw. that best friend archetype is in there. But what is interesting is in terms of the tactics that these characters use, Amenza and Naniska are different. Amenza is kind of reverent to the past. It's got a more spiritual aspect. They form a nice contrast, and it gives Naniska someone to confide in. And that is a character function.
She really has 2, though. She has 2 confidants, which is really great.
Who do you think's the second one?
Amenza. and Izogi, like, definitely in different ways. Tactically, she confides in one, and personally, she confides in the other, which is really, really great.
Great observation.
We see a lot of Naniska and Izogi fighting together, and you can see, obviously, the love they have for each other, but you get very few scenes of Izogi and Naniska by themselves.
Right, because it's that tactical and public almost, and the personal and intimate, which is just fantastic.
So they've chosen a character that is contrasting in some ways while still belong in terms of the character web and the stuff that we've talked about before. Is it has to make sense that these characters are friends that are in the world together. They're both brutal fighters. Like that's not. It's that Niska seems to choose violence as the answer, and Amenza chooses a different approach. Parallel that to Naui and her confidant is Izogi. So Izogi is kind of a mentor character, but I think the problem with a mentor character as an archetype is what does mentoring actually look like? If you describe mentoring as a verb, what verbs, what actions does a character take to mentor someone, right?
Teach, shepherd, guide.
Yeah, but how do you teach people, right?
Well, it depends.
I mean, you've literally got scenes of Izogi teaching her how to fight, telling her about sharpening her weapons.
You can lead by example, you can lead by, show don't tell, but you can also lead by, that literal, like, actually, you do this.
Yeah.
She slaps her around a bit in that sort of loving, way, that, like, gruff, older, wizened, come on, kid, but actually, like, I'm a softie at heart, like...
You are powerful. More than you even know. Do not give your power away.
I mean, where was Lashana Lynch's Oscar nomination campaign?
Oh, man. People talk about what they should just do with James Bond, and we literally had her play one of the best 007s, right?
Yeah.
The fact that she didn't get a supporting nomination is a crime.
Oh, she's amazing.
She is, to be honest, like, obviously, you can argue about, who quote unquote acts better in this film, whatever, and Viola Davis is obviously in a class of her own. But I think the film actually hinges on Lashana Lynch. She doesn't really interact with the king, but in terms of how she interacts with all of the main storylines and all of the main characters, and she's funny, she's compelling, she's romantic, she's everything. And if she doesn't work, none of the rest of the plot lines work.
In terms of character function, I'm glad I asked that question because that's kind of what I wanted you. You gave me examples of very specific things that she could do with Naui, right? Character function wise. And what she's actually doing is giving Naui skills, right? And it's such a weird, like, this is my role-playing game background, but what skills does your character have? It's a great question because skills is knowledge in action, right? That's what is a skill. It's not just knowledge. It's knowledge that you can act upon. And that's what you need your characters to be able to do, right? You need them to have knowledge of things that they can act on. We'll see this particularly in Nope, right?
Yeah.
But also fucking in Riders of Justice, all those characters have skills. But it's also such contrast because we've deliberately Naui is played as more emotional, headstrong, arrogant, lacking discipline. We see her as being reckless, but not necessarily a good fighter. So she is literally has a supporting character that pulls her along and develops those skills.
Yeah, in contrast to Naniska, because like every scene that Naui and Izogi have, there is following that usually a scene where Naui and Naniska butt heads until the point where, well, even after when Naui actually wins the trials, they're still butting heads straight away after that.
Em pointed this out, and it was such a great observation that Naui and Naniska is actually kind of played more like a romantic comedy. Right? It's the characters, the opposites attract.
The odd couple.
The odd couple that kind of realize they need to be together at the end. So, I mean, I just think that's a really interesting example. The support character, we've talked about the POV characters with the wives. And what's interesting is that part of what makes their function work is the characters have wants, right? So we know that the advisors are competing for the king's ear. They actually literally talk about this, right? But they're given their wants. So part of their function is served by the fact that they're developed enough as characters to have wants that are independent. So part of this film feeling such like a rich tapestry is that the characters have wants. It aligns with these skills that they have. But the one that I want to kind of talk about before I finish my rant, because I think it's really interesting, is Malik. I talked about it as being a subversion of the romantic trope, which is part of the film's theme of looking at the way that the patriarchy works in this world. But Malik is interesting because I definitely think there's something thematic going on with him that's separate to that, right? That it's not just him as the romantic love interest.
Yeah, they've cast a very beautiful man.
Oh, he should be on a Mills Boone cover, right?
Yeah.
Like when we see him with his shirt off at the water.
Good Lord.
His traps are nearly as big as Lashana Lynch's, and her traps are fucking amazing in this film.
I also just, speaking of subversion, like I love the way that all of the women are portrayed as beautiful, and he's the only person that we see as just like buck naked.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's very intentional in the way that it does that, and it's very female gaze, and I think that's certainly turning that on him in a very intentional way.
I mean, and maybe this is just my own biases, but like he's compatriot. So he also has a friend in his storyline,
yes,
which is Santo, who is a Brazilian slave trader, right? And so they're paired up so we can get them talking about their situations, but their contrast is because Santo is obviously or it's not that he's a true believer, it's that he is incredibly amoral, right? And he is kind of the corruptive influence on Malik. So he ends up becoming the opposer to Malik's journey, which is Malik realizing that the world that he's grown up in and the privilege he's been given in some ways is not really his, that ultimately Santo views him as just as much a commodity. But do you think Malik has a function outside of the romance?
I think we needed a further outsider's point of view, right? So because Nawi is our audience surrogate in terms of she helps us, like they have to introduce her to the specifics of training and the specifics of how all of these things work. However, she's still quite an insider. Like she's part of the broader culture and the broader everything. But you bring in someone literally from overseas, like he comes in on a boat. And so it's his purpose is to contextualize it within, yes, they've been talking about slave trade and palm oil trade and all these things broader, but he makes it quite realistic. And so I think that's his story function outside of the romance, is really both of theirs, Santo as well as Malik's, is to broaden the conflict and make it have this, again, we're talking about this not just as an ensemble, but it's an epic, to make it a bit of more of a global, large scale sort of story.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like Santo represents that more.
I'm looking at them both together because they come into it together. So I'm sort of looking at them as a unit.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
They are the representatives of colonialism, right? But they've deliberately made Malik, and I want to say beautiful, because I almost said effeminate, but that would come across as a pejorative, but they've deliberately chosen to cast someone who is not threateningly masculine in that role. Neither of them are, in fact, neither Santo nor Malik. Malik is half Dahomey. He has a slave mother. He's coming here literally with his high school buddy to go on a tourist trip to see where his mum comes from.
And he's confronted with he's got this great speech about, basically he had been convinced of the colonialist dream, right? That the life in Brazil was so much better. And he's like, oh my God, I never imagined how beautiful Dahomey would be, right? So it's him going on through on that journey. So it is speaking to colonialism. And coming to your mini arc thing, right, and I'd love to unpick some of you more, but Malik has a mini arc, which is ultimately he is given a choice. At the end of the film, basically what has happened is Niska's gone to rescue Nawi. She thinks Nawi's dead. She learns that Azogi definitely has been killed, right? Awfully. Her death is so tragic that I actually really makes the Niska's rage there, where the Niska's like, no prisoners, we're going to burn this port down, their slave trade ends tonight, right?
Violence is the answer.
Malik doesn't really help Nawi escape. He gives her a dress, warns her that, she needs to be careful, but she's like, I don't need your help. And he's like, okay, I'll wait for you.
Importantly, he gives her the key.
It is not safe for us. I brought you close. I will sneak you out at nightfall.
Do you own me now?
Of course not.
Get out!
I am trying to protect
By
you.
locking me in.
Do you know what they would do to you? A white man was killed.
You have the key now. can choose when the luck is turned.
That scene is so crucially important for him to not represent slavery. He has, in his own way, in his European colonialist way, saved her, rescued her, right? Because otherwise she would be dead in that moment.
That's his mini arc, if you will. That scene is so key. Yep.
Yeah. And then ultimately he has this moment where he takes care of his friend Santo. So trying to get Santo away from Nawi, but that leads him and Santo down to the beach. And Santo, in the middle of effectively a slave revolt, right, gets some slaves, pulls some slaves off and is like, you've got to row. And Malik makes the choice to cut the slaves free. And he just leaves the slaves with Santo. So Santo dies at the hands of the people he oppressed, not at Malik's thing. But the film is at pains to give us that point of view to that storyline to complete his character arc to the point where you're like they just say Malik needs to get out of there, and you're like, fuck, poor guy. Like, is he going to go to England? Is he going to Brazil? Is he going to go to Dahomey? Where does he belong? And it's kind of an interesting moment that they leave that as a question for the character.
And to your point, Naniska and Nawi are not anywhere in that scene. That is a scene that is completely separate, point of view wise and an impact on the story wise. It is just for Malik's story. It is quote unquote servicing Malik.
Yeah. Just to finish that off, Malik then has, after Santo dies, he has a moment where he sees Nawi in this beautiful white dress that she's kind of not wearing the heavy stuff because she makes an earlier comment like, how do your women run in these clothes? This is ridiculous.
Costume design nomination also robbed.
Oh, man.
Continue.
Yeah. And he looks at Nawi like, are you going to come and look at me? And she just smiles at him and nods and is like, see you later. Like, as you say, it's not really a choice for her, but it is leaving Malik alone with the impact of colonization on him, right? So there is the impact of colonization on the Oyo and the Dahomey, but it's also on someone like Malik. So they are leaning into the theme with this character.
So, Stu, you've covered
a lot.
Character function brilliantly in terms of like each of these two storylines, each of the characters has their own antagonist. In fact, each of them have multiple antagonists. Like Naniska has both Gezu and the Oyo general
Oba
rapist, right? Nawi has at certain points Naniska, but also Malik is, to me, he's a romantic interest, but from her story, he's actually a source of antagonism. He's kind of calling her away from that path.
Yeah. But even so she's got two friends, right?
Yeah.
That she has who's going through training with her.
Fumbe and Shante.
Yeah. Her dynamic with Shante is competitive, right? That's the group dynamic, right? They literally race each other to see who's the best, right?
Love it.
And Shantae's got, she has got such a presence. She looks angry all the time, but then they give her moments where she fucking laughs. They're, super competitive.
I love her so much.
Yeah. And Nawi wins, and then they fucking hug and celebrate that they're both in it. And meanwhile, Fumbi, who actually says that she doesn't really want to be a warrior but doesn't have anywhere to go, kind of serves more of a collaborative, cooperative dynamic with Nawi, right? That she's the friend that needs her help. Like, they're both allies in different ways with that character, helping her survive, basically, soldier school. But that's part of what makes this feel like a rich tapestry, because Fumbi and Shanti are also given reasons about why they want to stay.
And a much lesser film would have cut Fumbi entirely. But when you're looking at it in terms of an ensemble, Nawi has Izogi who helps mentor her, but then she helps mentor someone in turn, and she turns back and she does offer her, that sort of pass it on. And I think that, again, when you're talking about an ensemble, you can't just have your protagonist go only one direction. She's reaching up to help herself be pulled up, but she's also reaching back to bring somebody up with her, and not just across with Shantae as well. So you've got all of these different dynamics going in slightly different directions.
And this is part of what makes it feel so rich, is that Shantae is one of the women that they've taken from the people that raided them slaves. So effectively, Shantae belongs to one of the Mahi tribes, right? And they give her a choice of, do you stay or do you leave? And she chooses to stay. And one of the other Agoge actually has a go with her and goes, you're Mahi, you don't belong here, blah, blah, blah. And then later, sadly, Shantae dies And that same character, who I don't know the name of, who is not listed, says, "My sister, you fought bravely," right? So they have given a character who's, like Shantae has barely any lines. They've got another character that is not of the main storylines, just to close that off and show that there's this rich world of characters beyond our primary storyline, right?
So we can continue to marvel at just how well the web is. And like I said, I've broken down how Nawi and Naniska's storylines kind of interact and bounce off each other. But I want to ask you guys, we don't know why the writers chose to do this, but we can in broad terms say Naniska was like the classic protagonist of a historical epic, and Nawi is the classic point of view character. And you guys both observed that either of those could have been the film. So what do you think is the effect of them having decided we are going to do two complete storylines that do interact with each other, but could largely stand alone, with this web of intricate characters servicing both of those stories? We're going to invest that sprawling time in this action epic that feels taut. It doesn't feel slow at any point. We've used words like epic and sprawling, but it is fast-paced.
Oh, it flies. Absolutely flies. I couldn't believe when it finished how... Yes, it does have a few endings, and you sort of... You can tell when you get to the end, you feel those endings. They take their emotional time, but man, the whole film flies by. Like, I think that it is this idea, this concept of sisterhood, right? And of the fact that your individual journey matters in context, matters to all of the people around you. And again, talking a little bit about, it does matter globally. Like, it does matter on a larger scale, whether or not you ever see the effects of that or not. And I think if you look at, Gina Prince Bythewood's general approach to storytelling, she is a strong believer in that. You focus on the individual, and that story necessarily has this massive ripple effect. And I think that you can see that in this storytelling. Like, all of the characters have this ripple effect on each other. And that if Naniska didn't have her advisor, if she didn't have her daughter, if she didn't have someone to butt heads with, if she didn't have the wife of the king who is both antagonistic and then in some ways also supportive of her, she wouldn't become the titular woman king.
But they could have filled those with other characters, all just interacting with Naniska, rather than have an entire separate storyline.
Sure, but it's a richer tapestry.
I'm not arguing with that.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the fact? So just imagine you're a writer now, and you're like, I'm going to write my sprawling historical epic, and I've got one character, and then you go, but what if I had two storylines?
Well, I think that's the difference between The Woman King and Gladiator, right? Like, you make a choice as to what type of story and what themes you want to explore and what character, and then you decide accordingly how you are going to allocate your character resources or your ensemble, if you will. And in this case, they decide that imbuing all of the characters of the ensemble with their own mini arcs and with their own personalities and with their own interactions, etc., in creating this richer tapestry is better at achieving their goal.
Because it gives female characters agency. So I certainly think there's a thematic idea here, and I'm using theme both in terms of what does it mean, but also theme as this is an organizing principle to emphasize the women in this story, right? So having that allows there to be a ripper tapestry of female characters, right? Because you can kind of do things like the king may make the decision that we're going to fuck off the Oyo. We can see the general do it. And we can also see Nawi and what the training is and see things from her perspective. So it's a point of view thing that builds the idea of what is the effect of colonization, but also the way that women are treated at this time, right? So, we learn that Nawi, like, we see her rejecting the husband who's going to buy her, right? So we see the conditions in which she lives. And those things are part of what this film is about. That these characters, they have that line, you need to convince people to be bound. And these are things that they have chosen. These women have chosen not to be bound by these rules.
I also want to throw one more thing out there, which is that if you want more of your audience to be able to relate to your story, then giving them people who are fully fleshed and three-dimensional in terms of this and that are also very different means a broader number of your audience is going to be able to relate to somebody. You know, everyone obviously always wants to be, like, we all want to be Naniska, right? You watch this film and everybody wants to be Naniska. That's the, you know, the aspirational. But when it comes down to reality, most of us will actually relate to, you know, Naui or Agozi or Amenza or some, you know, even Fumbe, the character who's sort of like this, I have nowhere else to go. I have no other option. And so I'm going to make it work, right? We're all going to relate on a more practical level to some of these characters, even if our aspiration is, of course, always the woman king.
So I've only come to this answer, Mel, after listening to you summarize what you think the film is actually about. Because if you've got a film that is about women in terms of their standing with men, then the more women you have with fully serviced storylines, the more effectively you are going to tell that story. And while, yes, we've got Naniska, by necessity of this fast-paced plot, has to start out being the fully fledged general. She is not someone who, like you've said, Stu, is going to open being given away to a man.
She can disrespect the king and there not be consequences to her disrespect of the king.
Yeah, for sure. But there's going to be a different sense of powerlessness, right? She is a fully fledged warrior general followed by an army. There's only so far she can fall, whereas Naui starts pretty low down the pecking order. And I think that, to me, is the main reason perhaps why Naui's story brings out something so different in this. Because it is literally one woman finding her power and being able to choose her own path, because that's what she wants. She didn't want to have her path chosen for her.
And interestingly, like from a structural point of view, Naui, the first half is a rise to power story, right? But you also, which are kind of interesting, but you get to intercut that with someone who has a lot of power. So you get someone who's quite powerless and the fun, like, oh, the training sequences, but we get to see the general be awesome, right? And Naui doesn't become awesome until like the middle of the film later, and then Naniska's kind of story really kicks off to the end. So it allows them some kind of interesting structural ideas.
Yeah. I mean, my only criticism of the film is that I actually think their interaction on each other, there's huge stories on each other. Like Naniska realizing that the product of her serial rape and her trauma is alive and is a part of her army. They never really show that affecting her or her choices.
What?
I think it affects her, but not her choices. I'll split the difference.
I'm talking about my personal experience of the film. You can treat it otherwise, but when they had, you know, one of the 5 endings where Naniska is saying to Naui and they're crying like,
It is not your fault what happened to me. You are not the thing that hurt me.
I'm like, oh, is that what Naui was upset about? Like, she never got to have a scene with any other characters about, so it turns out that Naniska's my fucking mom and my father was rapist and this is how I feel about that.
No, she doesn't actually have a confidant in that sense.
So Naniska's journey was actually about coming to terms with her own trauma, right? It wasn't dramatized through her relationship with Naui. She doesn't like throw Naui again for a second time and then go and rescue her. And to the same point, Naui's journey is about her choosing her sisters over Malik. It's not, again, reflected in and against her journey with Naniska. So I think they made better choices in that sense. But just in me pondering the question of, so you've got these characters whose alleged internal journey ought to kind of feel like it's reflected against each other and it's not really played out at the climax of the film that much. Or it's all done in dialogue where they explain to us what they're supposed to be feeling. To me, in the end, they made the better choices where they just kept them separate. Like, there is a version of this film where Naui and Naniska were not actually ever mother and daughter, and the film would probably work almost as well.
It would work as well as an ensemble, but not as an quote-unquote epic.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's where you start playing into those epic tropes in that it's almost so much larger than life. And especially, and this is where the shortcomings or limitations is maybe a better word than shortcomings of such a massive ensemble become apparent, is that you can only service so many emotional beats or, C plots or really tiny character moments in something like this before you end up with like a 4-hour drag.
All right.
That's a lot on the Woman King, but it's certainly got the most sprawling ensemble. So our sprawling discussion covered the sprawling ensemble.
Here's my tiny plug, because I won't get into it and break it all down. But if you want to learn how to introduce your characters and show, don't tell, just study every scene where every character in this movie is introduced, because it's absolute fucking perfection. Moving on.
Have you written an article on that, Mel? 'Cause maybe you should, and then we can just post a link.
Maybe I will, because I've written an article on the other two, so maybe I'll do The Woman King in the next couple of weeks/month. See if anyone will publish it. If you want to pay me to publish this, please hit me up. My email will be in the show notes.
But you have written an article that was published about Riders of Justice.
Great
Mel.
segue.
Vil I ikke sidde her? Der er et enkelt plads.
Mange tak.
Selv tak.
Det er bare fordi, at jeg savner en.
Ja. Markus Hansen. Mit navn er Otto Hoffmann, og det er Lennart. Jeg var med samme tog som din kone og datter. Hvad ved I? Jeg synes, du har krav på at vide, at det ikke var en ulykke.
Hvorfor siger du, at det ikke var en ulykke?
Ham her. Men han skyndte sig af på den station sekunder inden ulykken indtraf. Til Kurt Tandem Olesen, der er præsident for rockergruppen Riders of Justice. Det var et attentat.
Do you want to summarize Riders of Justice, given your love for this film?
Oh my God, I love this film so much. Yes. So look, my history with this film goes, we were in crazy lockdown. Chaz decided that as a writers group, we should watch a film. He picked this one. I looked at it and went, I like Mads Mikkelsen. Sure, it's going to be, dadcore, whatever. We watched it. I loved it. I watched it again. Lockdown ended. I went to the theater and watched it again. I wrote something about it. I watched it again. It is easily one of my new favorite Christmas movies. Riders of Justice is it's a very dark comedy about found family. It's about grief. So the one sentence plot summary is a teenage girl watches her mom get blown up, and then through a bunch of old dudes who are bent on violence, tries to figure out whether or not her mom's death or her father's return or her new friends actually mean anything.
I would say that the plot is actually seemingly way more conventional, which is a soldier is in, I think, Afghanistan.
A sandy place.
One of America's wars.
Oh, God.
And his wife is killed and his daughter is injured in a train accident. And then a man comes to him and convinces him that the accident wasn't actually an accident, that it was a assassination attempt that succeeded on a gang leader, and he goes around to kill the gang that was responsible for killing his wife.
You are correct. However, you're ignoring the frame tale, which is that a bike gets stolen. So when we're talking about this in terms of an ensemble, we meet first this like grandfatherly figure and his granddaughter who are bike shopping, and we think that they're somehow going to be important. And technically, their actions set off the chain reaction that is the entire plot of this film, but we don't actually meet them again until the final scene of the movie. So it's this very strange frame tale that is actually necessary thematically and does set off the plot, although you could probably set it off otherwise.
100%. So, I mean, look, there's so many themes in this movie, but they could have given, and I think Stu's going to talk to the character function of all the different skills of the people in this film. They could have given all those skills to Mads as he goes super soldiering his way around.
Yep.
But to me, the reason why they made this an ensemble is Mads has to go through the journey that most revenge films tend to push the protagonist towards, which is revenge isn't going to help you deal with your grief or your loss, and you have to deal with that in a different way. Sorry, I'm going to call him Mads rather than Marcus.
They know exactly what they're doing casting Mads in this. they are shortcutting the typical type.
Seemingly it actually goes on a fairly conventional-ish kind of setup. Early inciting incident where the wife is killed. We do get this storyteller cut, I keep on using that phrase, to this Otto character where him and his colleague, is it Lennart that's his colleague, or is it?
Colleague / best friend / like buffer between most of society.
Yeah. Kind of doing a pitch to the uni board around basically processing randomness and seeing patterns in randomness. And then it turns out, on the train that killed the mother. And so he uses that to pitch Mads. So it is kind of like a conventional, like, I know who killed your family storyline. But it is that group of characters. So we've got the Mads story being impacted by Otto, Lennart, and is it
Emmentaler, who's their sort of like friend / hacker.
Lennart's the hacker. Emmentaler is the facial recognition software program.
So setting up the skills that you mentioned that Marcus or Mads would need is that if he just was given this information, he'd need to be able to track down the people involved in the gang and kill them, right? We know he's a soldier. He's got the killing skills. It's the tracking them down that Otto's group. And interestingly, it could also have just been one person. This could have been a buddy comedy with Marcus and Otto. And they, again, have chosen to not make it just a buddy comedy between the man of violence and the man of computers, with the man in the violence and his weird friends, and then their burgeoning relationship with his daughter, because he is completely shut down with his daughter. So he is lacking the skills.
It makes it very much an it takes a village sort of story, as opposed to an odd couple and one of them happens to have a kid.
Well, you couldn't have told, and this is to my point thematically, like we were having an off-mic conversation before we started recording. To me, this film is about it takes a village, and so you can only tell that story with a village of characters.
Yeah. It is a found family, and it's a sprawling family, and you sort of essentially end up with a family of like 6, arguably 7 people.
Yeah. So Stu was like flippantly somewhat in our chat thread. What did you say? It's like it's a 2-hander, but one hand has 5 characters.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily is true because, yes, Mads Mikkelsen is clearly both kind of the protagonist, although he doesn't take the first action of the film. That's Otto. Otto kicks off this plot 100%. I'm not brooking any argument about that. If Mads never heard that, he wouldn't go on any of that journey.
So this is an interesting semantic debate about the difference between an inciting incident and a turning point.
Well, the inciting incident is the bomb on the subway.
Yeah, that's true. The coincidence that kicks the story in action.
Well, it's a coincidence. However, they actually then chase down the people who created that bomb. Like, it's a coincidence that they were there, but the action was very intentional.
Yeah.
With the bomb on the subway.
Yeah, in terms of the initiator, like Marcus would have just been completely shut down. So coming back to this idea of who initiates.
Yep.
And that is a difference to Taken. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, absolutely, Liam Neeson's character, like, after his daughter is taken, absolutely initiates the action there. And so, yeah, right. I think you're right. That's what's interesting is Otto is the initiator, but the person who can then initiates after that. Right? So that's interesting. They're able to change it. But it is, like, because ultimately every scene needs someone who fucking does something.
You're right, except I am also right.
But there are 2 main plots in this.
Ooh.
So there's the plot of hunting down the Riders of Justice, the bikie gang. And Mads is very much the driver of that plot. And I think the other plot is, and it's kind of associated to that, but hiding it from Mathilde. And Mads is not the driver of that plot.
So Mathilde's, just to be clear, is Marcus's daughter.
The only girl in this whole fucking thing. It is such a straight white men film, and I love it so much.
But in any scene with Mathilde, once the group is kind of assembled, and because they all end up living in the same house, right? Because they are tricking Mathilde that they are crisis trauma counselors.
She ends up with like 5 dads. It's great. It's so, I say it's a straight white man film. It's actually queer as fuck again.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm building towards is actually, to me, one of the best relationships is the relationship between Lennart and Badashka, which I'll flag in a second.
Absolutely.
So there's these 2 main plot lines, and Mads drives one, Marcus, sorry, his character, and I would say not even Otto, but actually Leonard is kind of driving the other one. Otto fades into the background of this film for a long time until near the end, right? Because he actually doesn't want to engage with either plot.
He's all about the theory.
Yeah.
And as soon as it starts coming into practice, he freaks the fuck out.
And he doesn't want to go around facilitating murdering people, but he doesn't actively stop anything. He just sort of sits in the background until the climax. It's this film that constantly surprises you. So they go to the first lead. It's a great scene because they show up at this bikey dude's house and the bikey dude threatens Mads and you're all like, oh, don't threaten Mads, dude. Don't do that. That's going to go poorly for you. But they turn around and walk away, right? And the doors close. And then Mads turns around and knocks on the door again. And in that house, they discover a young sex-trafficked Ukrainian man tied up. And it's particular, only Leonard knows he's there, right? And Leonard is going, oh shit, he was there to clean up the evidence. And then he's seen that there's a young man tied up and he deliberately walks away, leaving the young man alive. Oh, we don't actually know that he leaves the young man alive at that point. It's revealed later. But he doesn't talk about it at all when they go in the car. And you kind of forget the young man at all until there's a later scene with the big bad, the big bikey gang leader, torturing this poor young man.
Badashka / the Gimp, as I believe he's actually credited.
So he's torturing him to get the lead so that the plot can kind of kick off again, right? It gets the bikies chasing back after the main characters, the group of Marcus and the hackers. And I thought, oh, that's it, right? He served his character function. He was there to be the how do the baddies find the goodies, right? But then in that attack, Mads them all, kills all, and they rescue him and bring him back. And he then becomes a source of a relationship with Leonard that goes working on Leonard. And there's kind of very offhand references to Leonard having been sexually abused by his uncles. And
yeah, I mean, you say it's offhand. It's very like Danish dark humor. Like they explicitly say it, but they deliver it as a joke, but it's not a joke.
Offhand may not be the right, casual and thrown away.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But also I thought that was, it's only on the second viewing that I kind of associated his trauma with that. I thought that was just the only way that he knew how to stop Mads from beating the shit out of him.
I think it's actually very layered. You're correct.
But then Badashka, because all these people are living in this house, Badashka then becomes like a mother figure to Mathilde.
Yep, he's doing all the cooking and the cleaning and the philosophizing. And it's funny because there's a fake therapist, but then he becomes almost like the real therapist, and then he's telling these folk stories and he's knitting sweaters. Oh my God, he's the best. I love him so much.
So this film takes like a tiny plot crumb and turns it into this intricate character web where this is where I kind of disagreed with your flippant point about it's Mads and all these other characters are all like the two-hander, but they're all the one kind of character group, because they all themselves, like Mathilde has Sirius, Mathilde has Badashka, Leonard has Badashka, then also Otto, Leonard, and Emmentaler themselves internally have problems as well and their own relationships.
And Mathilde has a boyfriend who's this like weird tertiary character that then becomes slightly more major, that then becomes a plot point, that then becomes a turncoat, that then becomes we sympathize with you. Like it's this whole thing.
All these characters aren't just about driving Marcus to confront his grief and to accept very strange people as family, even though that is what they do. Right? But this film chooses to make each of them their own reflection of Marcus's own journey. Different aspects of it, yep. Right? They're all dealing with loneliness and trauma.
And PTSD.
And this film, the plot of this film forces them all to confront it as well. Even Emmentaler, he has that kind of journey where he actually wants to join Mads in being in the violence and, you know, is the best with the weaponry and the gun training and the confidence.
I think Emmett Taylor clearly such a loner. The introduction, his scene, we're talking about character introductions. His scene could not be more stereotypical. I am a loner. Even to the point where they're trying to buzz him and they're like, we have pizza, please let us up to your apartment. And like nobody has been in his apartment but him for clearly decades.
So just dovetailing into the skills thing, because there's this line from Steve Kaplan about comedy comes from characters that lack the skills they need to win, right? And so the comedy in this, in a film like a classic kind of revenge thriller, you know, the Liam Neeson has the skills. You know, the Mads has the skills, right? They're men of violence. And so you get this funny thing of these ultra competent characters being able to do the story with these characters that, yes, they have computer skills, but in terms of this world of violence, they lack the skills necessary.
They have no social skills. They have no practical skills. They have no...
Yeah. So you get great comedy out of Mads teaching them to be people of violence, but also the other way around with them trying to, I guess, teach Mad to be emotional, and Sirius is an important part of that. Like his emotional intelligence is about them kind of communicating that to Mad. So you get a lot of the comedy from the interaction of these people that are actually highlighting their lack of skills in particular areas.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've said in terms of an ensemble, just like when you've got your D plot being fully fleshed out for tertiary characters, I find that incredible. And then that you start using them to have an impact on the other characters as well. I mean, this film ends happily. And in the first viewing, I actually, I felt a little bit robbed, you know, like Mads was dying and his daughter was cuddling him and the plot had kind of resolved and he was going to die.
Cut to an ugly sweater Christmas party.
Yeah. And he's alive. And I'm like, actually, this is so much better because this is almost more torture for Mads than dying would have been. Like him sacrificing himself heroically for his daughter is something that would have come easy for him in the beginning of the film.
But now he has to engage with all these people who actually love him. They're going to make him unwrap Christmas presents and make him wear an ugly sweater and make him sing Christmas carols.
Yeah.
It's great. I think one of my favorite things, though, and I think it exemplifies the whole ensemble thing that we've been talking about, right, is at some point we go into Mathilde's room and she's got these sticky notes posted all over the wall above her bed. And it's almost like the stereotypical serial killer where she's got all these sticky notes and she's got the yarn and she's got the things and she's trying to connect all of the dots. And it is a philosophical and thematic thing, right? Like she's trying to connect her mother's death to her bike being stolen, to her meeting Otto, to her dad being in the war and all these things. But I think also it really actually visually exemplifies the way that the film is trying to say we are all connected. It's a thematic thing. And if, to Chaz's point, if you are going to really go hard at that as your theme, how do you do that without, to bring it back to the entire point of this podcast series, being an ensemble? How do you say we're all connected, we're all important, we all matter to each other, we all need each other, which I believe is the point of my Bright Wall Dark Room essay about this film, right? Is that we need each other, and you do that via an ensemble. If you can't really do that via a two-hander.
How do you reconcile that interpretation of the film with the fact that they ultimately killed a whole bunch of people that weren't responsible for killing his wife, which is the twist at the end, that ultimately they picked a fight with a biking gang that had nothing to do with what happened?
Well, that's, I mean, first of all, Danish film, so sure. Dramatic irony. And also, they
but I'm talking on a thematic
defense.
I'm talking on a thematic meaning level, not it's a Danish film. It's a Danish film.
But,
so to me, there's two big thematic pools that this film is exploring, and they're not necessarily connected. So one is all about like family and relationships, and there is actually one line that ties both the pools together, but the other is about essentially asking the question, does life make sense or not? Right? And Otto is introduced with Leonard in that scene that you talked about, presenting an algorithm trying to make sense of the world.
Is deafness connected to people who buy a certain type of compact automobile? Like, yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking about that scene where it's actually revealed that they made a mistake, the mathematicians, and it was actually random. So Mads had been looking for someone to blame for his wife, and these mathematicians had brought it to him. And this had given him the excuse to solve the problem of his wife's death using the only means available to him, which was violence, right? And as soon as that was taken away, it was so funny because my wife was like, so wait, who did blow up the train? And I'm like, Anna, no one blew up the train. It was an accident.
It was exactly what the police told you at the beginning of the film it was.
And that is what triggers his emotional breakdown and forces him to confront the grief of his wife. And it leads to a series of scenes where this is where Otto re-engages with the film, mainly on a character perspective. But he has a scene both with Mathilde in her room talking through her post-it notes. And he basically says, with all the computer power in the world, it will never, ever make sense. And then he has another line with Marcus where he's basically trying to drive Marcus to re-engage with his daughter on an emotional level because otherwise he's going to miss it. And he's got a line, I'm going to have to go back and find it because obviously it's in Danish and I'm reading subtitles, but it's something like, maybe nothing matters anymore, but if it doesn't matter, then the only thing that matters is relationships.
But also, I'm going to argue that just like The Woman King, the title is actually a bit of a giveaway, right? Who are the Riders of Justice? Technically, it is the name, right, of this bikie gang that they're blaming, but also aren't they the Riders of Justice?
Oh, 100%.
Exactly.
Yes.
They are also the Riders of Justice, and you could put quotes around it, and justice can be ironic, and also you have the people who are stealing the bikes. The title is very tongue-in-cheek, and the title sets you up for all of these different thematic reveals. I think that's really lovely.
I don't know. Did we answer your questions, Jimmy?
Yeah, I've got my own take of it. It's more fun for me to ask than to, for me, this is a thematic thing. It's connected to trauma and the fact that we often look for reasons behind our trauma. Every character has trauma in this, right? All the characters that we are following. And some of that trauma is intentional and some of it was just shit luck, right?
I loved Emmentaler's trauma was that he wasn't allowed to play in the kid band anymore.
Right? And also the emptiness of revenge, because revenge is a response to trauma, right? So coming back to the question, what is the purpose of these characters in your film? We don't know the writing process for Anders Thomas Jensen here, but we can kind of read the tea leaves of what is the resulting film. What is the purpose of these characters they put in the film, and how did they cast it? Right? Like cast the characters, not the actors at the writing stage. So obviously for me, I think you sit there and you go, oh, it's Marcus, right? We've got this man of violence, not very good with his kid. That is a type that we know, which is part of fun is the trope. But what is he then missing? Right? Oh, he's missing, the home is missing kind of like the person, whose love language is food and nurturing, emotional intelligence. There's various other things, but rather than them putting them in one other character, they have, as, I flippantly said, put 5 of them on the one hand. I just think that they have cast the other characters in contrast to Marcus as a type, right? It's not that they found Otto and went, we need a Marcus character. Maybe that's what he did. But in terms of how the film functions, it feels to me that everything is in contrast to Marcus. And it's kind of interesting to think how they then respond, the character verb, what are their tactics, right? What is this, like beyond their skills, what tactics are they choosing? The reason that Marcus chooses violence is it's a skill, right? That's why he chooses it, and he's good at it. So of course, in his tactics, it's the first thing he does. We do the things that we're good at first, right? But what is interesting is that when Emmentaler is put under pressure, he actually responds with violence as well. Like he's got an anger thing, which is an interesting contrast, but he doesn't have the technical skills to be good with violence. But what do you think Otto and Lena, what do you think their kind of tactics are or skills that they use? And I'm talking computer skills. Let's focus on the relationship stuff. I'm curious, like why have they been brought in against Matilda?
I think the point then is they almost have to work together. that Otto has this pattern recognition and that Leonard is the one that's actually able to apply it to reality, which you can immediately, again, back to the character introduction, when they have their first scene, Otto's the one who's pitching to this big panel, this big board. He's like, look at all of this data and look at what the data says. And Leonard's like trying to pull him back or trying to contextualize it or trying to make it like, oh, this is how it actually works. So you've got Otto who just gets obsessed with the numbers and the data, and Leonard who tries to make it a personal, relatable thing. And so they are almost this Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of numbers, if you will. And when they get sort of presented to Mathilde as therapists in a Hail Mary by Marcus, they do the same thing. Otto is trying to throw numbers and data at Mathilde in terms of, this will answer your questions and treat your trauma. And Leonard's like, okay, what he actually means by all of that is this. And so that's their purpose in the story.
But I would say, Stu, to your earlier point, they could have made this a buddy comedy.
Yep.
Right? They could have got rid of Mathilde as a character, and it's just composite Otto and Mads, right?
Yeah. Or maybe kept Mathilde as like a cute 12-year-old if this was Shane Black. I mean, it is set at Christmas, so it's very Shane.
Yeah, but they've deliberately expanded out all the skills that they could have put into single composite characters into a whole lot of different characters. And some of it feels a bit tacked on, right? Like the fact that Leonard takes the lead in being the therapist because he's had
4,000 hours.
4,000 hours of therapy that haven't worked.
Yep.
And the subsequent scenes then sell that very well.
Yep.
But I don't think Otto and Emmentaler fade from those bits of the film, like where you're seeing the treatment of Mathilde and Sirius and them trying to engage with that. Leonard is taking the lead with that, and later Badashka as well. But Otto and Emmentaler don't actually have that much to contribute to those in terms of skills, and so that's why they fade to the background.
Yeah. And just my last point in terms of cast in the ensemble, Sirius is the absolute perfect foil boyfriend for Matilda because he is completely opposite Marcus. He's emotionally intelligent, but he's physically weak. He's effeminate in some of his presentation. Like, it's classic, like, the boyfriend is the opposite of the dad stuff. And I like that they don't do that she's with Sirius because she's trying to piss off her dad. She's with Sirius because he meets her needs that her dad cannot provide. Right?
Ooh, absolutely wonderful observation, Stu.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not sure if skills is the right word, but I like that skills is like connects to verbs or tactics, like the stuff that your character does, right? And when you cast about it, you can also look at what your characters are missing emotionally in terms of, particularly in terms of behavior, right? To kind of cast that character out if you're doing something like this, which is, it's a very specific kind of film. And it's a little bit, Nope is big, and it's got a lot of symbology in there, but it isn't necessarily driven about human relationships like this film.
I just wanted to note that I'm interested, Stu, because you're talking about character function, and each of these do have character functions, and I find it interesting that when you're in the plot of the treatment, of the healing of these characters, that Emmentaler and Otto, who have less skills in that space, that they just push them to the side in that plot line. They keep them in the barn, as it were.
Literally.
But then Otto does come to the fore when his form of treatment is actually sharing in his own trauma.
Yeah. So this stuff doesn't have to feel... I think the reason I'm getting into this character function stuff and thinking about it in terms of skill is because, one of the character types we see in films a lot is the Joker character. This is the character that cracks jokes, and we can think of it externally of the character cracks jokes to relieve tension or make the audience laugh. Like, we're thinking it as a very external thing. But when you start going, what is this character's... This is a skill that this character has, right? If you're funny and you're funny, when are you choosing to make the people around you laugh, right? If you're the character that's cracking joke, are you using it to make peace? Are you using it to relieve tension? Are you using it to kind of connect with people? Like, thinking of these skills and how they're deployed as character coming from a character wanting something is, I think, a pretty powerful way of thinking. So, I mean, I've been thinking about it in terms of our project, but it's like, we had a character that we kind of added some attributes on. Oh, they're going to be new agey, they're going to be into like crystals healing and stuff. But what we've decided is, that, the type is that they're the union rep, right? But the union rep is actually a set of attributes where they're kind of standing up for everyone else, right? And that is a skill. If I feel I have the confidence to speak on behalf of everyone else in the ways that we're being mistreated, and that is far more useful. I mean, it's literally useful in a storytelling thing than a series of fucking like cute things that we give a character to make them feel more dimensional. But like, unless that character uses those crystals or the spirituality is actually connected to them being like a truth teller or someone that's more emotionally intelligent or something like that, it is just going to feel like window dressing on the character. Are you frustrated with existing screenwriting software options that are designed to be a formatting tool and not much else?
Well, screenwriting just got easier. ArcStudio actually understands how screenwriters think. They've created screenwriting software that doesn't distract with an overloaded interface. Subtweeting there. So you can write without distraction.
Say goodbye to archaic, outdated screenwriting software and hello to advanced story building features, industry standard automatic formatting, and importantly, stress-free collaboration tools that are as easy to use as Google Docs.
It is about bloody time. ArcStudio is used by beginners and professionals alike, not saying where Stu and I sit in that spectrum, such as the team behind the Netflix show Arcane and David Wayne, writer-director of Wet Hot American Summer and Role Models.
Join the thousands of screenwriters who have already made the leap. ArcStudio offers a completely free plan, and you can also get $30 off the pro plan if you visit the link in our show notes or go to the link arcstudiopro.com/draft0, and draft zero as in draft zero, the word. So I say again, $30 off there's a completely free version, or you can also get $30 off the pro plan if you go to arcstudiopro.com/draft0, ZERO.
The link is in the show notes. You don't have to write this down.
Awesome if you do. All right. Nope.
Bro, what you see?
Something above the clouds.
That's big.
How big?
Big.
You think whatever killed Pops is out there?
Right here, you are going to witness an absolute spectacle. So what happens next? Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready? Here we go.
No. This could be an opportunity. I'm talking rich and famous for life.
There's plenty of videos for flying shit online.
Ain't nobody gonna get what we gonna get.
What we gonna get?
The money shot.
What's up?
Undeniable proof of aliens on camera. The Oprah shot.
You guys gonna tell me what's going on?
Hell no. There's something out here, and you're the only person in the world that can get it on film.
That cloud. They moved an inch.
It's aliens. They're just waiting for the perfect time to shove metal probes up our asses.
I'll be rooting for you.
It's your turn to summarize, Stubby.
All right. So the external kind of broad plot of Nope is actually seemingly quite simple. So we've got a family of horse wranglers, Haywood's Hollywood horses, that live out in a valley in California, right? And one day early on, this is kind of the inciting into the film, Otis Haywood Sr. is killed by a bunch of metal shit that fall out of the sky. The police kind of write it off, the police, the coroner, the authorities write it off as a freak accident where shit fell out of a light plane. But Otis Jr., OJ, doesn't believe that. But he's really desperate. He's selling his horses to the local Western theme park, Jupiter's Claim. And then basically what happens is their electricity starts fluctuating at his home. His sister, I think, is there at this point, and a UFO is kind of basically been flying over them, using it, as it will turn out, as its hunting ground. So the plot is like a monster movie. So it's basically this UFO, as it turns out, is actually some kind of monster of the sky. It may or not be extraterrestrial in origin. It's been feeding on the horses. Jupiter's Claim has been buying the horses from Haywood Hollywood's horses and feeding them to this monster. And the engine of the story is that Otis Jr. and Emerald, his sister, are working together with a guy that works at Fry's Electronics, Angel, to try and get a photo of this UFO so they can sell it for big money and kind of save the farm. So it's a save the farm story meets a monster movie.
I enjoyed the film because in a way, when we get into it, it's going to sound epic and sprawling, but it is actually a very contained idea. There is a monster literally living in that cloud over there that doesn't fucking move, right? Other than when it comes out to eat us. And we want to get a photo of it. And I loved how contained that is as a plot engine.
So I would say the ensemble is really, there's the storyline A, which is Otis Jr. and his sister, Emerald. And I think they're kind of like an interesting composite protagonist or initiator, right? They kind of work together to drive the story.
Do you see the initiator as the monster or not?
Look, you can, right? But in terms of where you think the story is going, like, is always an interesting question, because there is, what is the initiator of the overall story arc? Often this monsters thing, is Jaws the initiator? For me, every scene for something to happen needs someone to initiate, right? And then often you'll have the responder, right? So in fencing, when you talk about the initiator and the responder, and you could argue that in most stories, what we think of the protagonist is actually just someone responding to the inciting incident. I like initiator because it's implying a degree of agency. Why I like this idea of initiation, right, and it's weirdly coming back to sword fighting, is that people will take the action when they think that the tactics they have, or the skills that they have, tactics coming from skills, will win, right? You take action when you think you can win.
Or where you've got nothing to lose.
Or you got nothing to lose, right? But that's why you actually act first, because you see an opportunity, right? In fencing, it's a response to a provocation or an opening. So an opening is more passive, right? Oh, I see that there's an area that's undefended. A provocation is that they do something that then creates an opening. But that's why I like it as an idea, because it sounds like something that's more useful than what is a protagonist. Oh, it's kind of the main character, it's the actor, blah, blah, blah. But if you're like, there is a scene where someone wants something and they see an opportunity that they believe that their particular set of skills will allow them to get the thing that they want, then they will act, right? And then obviously they don't necessarily get it. There was, and bear with me, I'm going to keep on talking so no one else talks over me.
Put it on Stu's tombstone.
I'm calling back to our antagonist series, right? Because the question is this a monster, right? And we talked about like versus human, versus self, versus monster movies. And someone on Reddit...
Versus nature.
Yeah, versus nature, right? And one of the things that we decided is an interesting difference between like human characters and monster characters is you can't negotiate with monsters, right? They may want something, right? In this case, food, but you can't sit there and, negotiate the terms of their surrender.
Or their eating habits.
Yeah. So this person responded way back on Reddit about this breakdown, which is that man against, this is their terminology, man against man stories represent antagonistic forces that have volition and agency. Man against nature stories represent antagonistic forces that lack volition but have agency. And man against self stories are about antagonistic forces that lack agency but have volition, which I actually think is really kind of useful. It sounds very academic, but by volition, we're talking about will, and agency is the ability to act. So the interesting thing is, do you think Jean Jacket, the monster, has volition and agency? Or do you think the way, in terms of how it's presented, or do you think it just has agency, it's empowered to act, but we don't understand its will?
It appeals to just be an eating machine, so I don't know where that is in the volition-agency dichotomy.
But isn't that the shark in Jaws? I actually think that it's very intentionally not spelled out, that it's one of those ethereal things, and I find that fascinating.
Maybe I would use slightly different words. This poster's M.A. Gary's the volition and agency, because volition and agency are kind of connected, but we're talking about something that has the power to act and has a plan, I guess.
It doesn't feel like it. I mean, it feels like it has tactics, but it doesn't feel like it has deep sentience and thought.
Yeah.
Its responses, as they understand it and presented in the film, are somewhat automated. You know, like it doesn't appear to have a range of options available to it. Like, oh, I'll fuck off to another planet. They found me.
So I think, like, it may sound like we're being esoteric, but interesting in terms of an ensemble character, both the Woman King and Riders of Justice have character storylines that we could arguably see as their own individual plot lines, right? There may be like D-plot that we see the evil general, we cut to him and inside his point of view and see him dealing. Like him actually, when he loses the fight against Naziska, he's like, we got to sell some slaves and fuck out of here, right? We cut to him in that moment, right?
Yeah.
In Riders of Justice, we see them torturing Gimp Boy, but we also see kind of the impact of them being like, why are we getting targeted by this guy? Like, why is he picking on us effectively? But we never cut to Jean Jacket in Nope.
I mean, we cut inside of Jean Jacket at some point.
His literal point of view. Yes.
Yes, there are some times when we are in his point of view, but most of the times we cut inside him, we're in someone else's point of view being digested.
That is true. Technical, but true.
Okay, so coming back, OJ and Emerald, and I would just say in terms of that initiator thing, yeah, Jean Jacket kind of, I would say in the traditional terminology, you would say it's the inciting incident, right? OJ and Emerald could just fucking leave, right? And they go, nope, we're out. We're leaving the farm. There's something that's killing the horses. We're done. But they choose to stay. And that is what makes the story in its current form happen. Otherwise, it could potentially be Ricky Park's story, which is the Stephen Ewan character, right?
Yeah.
And you could end up being about him. But they have effectively a story in its common form. And the reason I say that the joint initiators is that Otis and Emerald together decide to go and take the photo of the creature that drives most of the actions of the second and third act, right?
Yeah.
The other B plot line is Ricky Park, who I just mentioned. And then the C plot line, which is very thin, is Antlers Holst, a wonderful return for Michael Wincott. Man, he's, who was in the first iteration of Firefly, otherwise known as Alien Resurrection. Right, and that's it. So this kind of, compared to the others, is the least ensemble-y, but it does some interesting things with point of view that makes it feel more unconventional in its approach to this kind of monster film.
Yeah. Especially when, I feel like, so in terms of the main mission of getting the photo, you've got OJ, Emerald, Angel, and ultimately Antlers on that mission. And there's another interrupter of the guy on the electric motorbike also wanting the same thing, where it becomes kind of competitive, but he doesn't understand the rules of the monster the same way that...
With the mirrored helmet.
Yeah. But I'm just like, the entire story of the film could have revolved around that. And that is the main story of the film. But the thing that fascinates me the most, and I'll let you guys digress on character function and other things, but there are whole sequences of this film where they leave that storyline and stay with Stephen Yeun to the point where there's a whole like flashback storyline that has nothing to do with the monster whatsoever and becomes very thematic, I guess. There's the storyline of Stephen Yeun's character, what's his name? Ricky. His storyline is the most frequently during the movie that makes me go, why am I watching this? Because it kind of so takes you out of the movie. And just to summarize it very quickly, so like Stu said, he's buying the horses, so he's essentially a source of antagonism initially to OJ.
And he wants to buy the whole ranch.
Yeah. So OJ's like hanging on to his father's legacy and his grandfather's legacy and this whole history, as is Emerald. And Ricky is the financial threat to that. Like, Ricky could have been the thankless money guy as a source of antagonism, but is not. Ricky, he's feeding the horses to these beautiful trained horses, right? There's a deliberate, his callousness towards the horses is important. He's feeding the horses to the monster to try and tame the monster, Jean Jacket.
Tame or satiate?
Well, he wants it to be part of a spectacle.
Yep.
He wants it to appear when he wants it to appear so he can monetize it. And then separately to all of that, we've got more flashbacks for Ricky's character than we have for any of the other characters, where it's going into he's got a very specific trauma where he was on a sitcom as a child actor that featured a chimpanzee character, and one day the chimpanzee character lost its shit and murdered a whole lot of people on set while Ricky was there. And to me, the most fascinating structural differences in this film is Ricky's stuff.
Yeah, because it's not interwoven, right? So it's an ensemble where we have chosen to have a completely different storyline for this character. We open with audio from that moment, right? And then we actually see a little bit of the chimp and it kind of eyeballs the camera and we cut away from it. So this film does a very good job of just like setting up those payoffs. So you set up very early the Gordy storyline. So that's the monkey. And even the Michael Westcott character, Atlas, is the cinematographer on a film set that OJ is working on when we kind of meet OJ and M in their natural environment. So them just trying to do the hustle with the horse after the dad has died. And we meet Atlas there. There is a phone call later to Atlas, right, which kind of sets him up as another character, but he isn't really involved in the storyline until the very third act, until the final, this is it, this is our moment, we're going to capture with a camera the creature, right? So they have made some interesting point of view stuff. And the film has got a lot of symbolism, but I think it is that cutaway to Gordy that makes people feel like this film is harder to decipher, because there is this running symbolism of also the Maybridge horse, but they're all kind of symbolic stuff. In terms of what they have chosen to do structurally is that they have given us this flashback, this access to Ricky. And the question is, as you say, why? And it feels like on the one hand is literally just answering a character motivation thing, which is, why does Ricky seeming to want to tame this monster, right? Well, he had this moment where he survived this attack from this monkey, and the monkey, after killing everyone, came up to Ricky as a young boy and went to fucking do a fist bump, right? So he feels like he's got a connection, and he talks about that in the Star Lasso moment when he's doing the big speech about how they're blessed by this creature and that they've got a connection with it.
See, every Friday for the last 6 months, my family and I have bore witness to an absolute spectacle. One that you'll be seeing here today.
And so it helps contextualize that, but it's also like, this could be just dialogue. Like, it's not necessarily do we need to see this character's trauma to understand why he believes he can tame a wild animal? Plenty of people believe they can tame wild animals. Like,
especially when there's money involved.
You could just have a character watching Grizzly, the documentary, right? Just to make that point. I'll talk about the skills thing, because I think this in some ways is a little bit more conventional in the use of like skills than Riders of Justice.
Yes.
So OJ, horse trainer, animal wrangler. You have a great speech of Emerald very early on listing all her excellent skills.
And I'm Emerald Haywood. I direct, write, produce, act. I do a little singing on the side. Motorcycles, baby. Look, I make a mean grilled cheese. If you're looking for crafty, just holler at me.
And they need Angel to be involved to do the tech. And it's a great storyline because they meet the guy at Fry's, and there's a great cut where he's like, no, the only reason this would be a problem is, if you're at a UFO hotspot, cut to, and then there's just a great reaction shot from both of them, smash cut to him out there setting it all up and being like, oh man, I'm into UFOs. And then we get a little bit of a rambling backstory about how his girlfriend has left him, because it feels like it's on point because it's about her becoming famous. But it's like all we need to know about why this character is involved. They could have given the electronic skills to OJ and M, but they have felt that maybe that they've got enough, that him being good with horses and her being good with a bunch of other random shit, or to Antlers, right? But they have given Angel this technical skill and given him his own kind of sense of life, right? And of course, then you've got Antlers being a cinematographer, but being the kind of cinematographer who builds his own camera, right? And they set up where he's watching animals to kill each other, and he's watching, seemingly on a Steinbeck, watching film. So we get him, like, he's one of those guys that's super into film.
I mean, they put a lot of effort into the character motivation of why Antlers would come on board in that third act.
Yeah.
He's almost the first character we meet. He's in that very opening scene, and he's clearly being very particular about cinematography and very particular about all of these things on set before we actually meet and get to know all of these main characters. When I was watching the film for the first time, I'm like, oh, like this guy, sure, I thought it was more of a comedic beat. And then when he comes back around, you're like, oh, no, they were actually setting us up for him to become, part of an ensemble, if you will.
Yeah.
But that opening scene also establishes the shortcomings of OJ himself.
Absolutely. It establishes his shortcomings, it establishes his psyche, and it also establishes Emerald's, well, more her psyche than her shortcomings, like her salesmanship and her character and her, like, their contrast, her hustle, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I thought this was just going to be, like, that scene was kind of establishing to me, like, oh, these two need to come together to save the ranch because they need both their skills. And their father had both their skills. The father had the horse wrangling skills and the salesmanship, and those two skills have split with his children.
And it's interesting because you get the sense that he's good with the horse, but he doesn't know how to tell other people how to be good with the horse, right?
It's a very different skill set, right? Like being able to handle it versus being able to communicate it.
Yeah, and so they do a good job of this is a character who's actually quite internal, right? So you got a character who's not much of a talker.
So he's clearly establishes, yes, he's internal in this opening scene, but he becomes even more so after the death of his dad. And I've actually heard a couple of people refer to his performance, but in a derogatory way, is, oh, it's really, depressive. It's like, yeah, that is the point. Like, he becomes so internal and so shrunken and so unable to communicate effectively, and that's part of his actual character journey.
The Ricky character, so we've talked about him being a point of view, right? He gets us into the Gordy story in the past, right? He's got a function to be an antagonist to OJ. Do you think he's contrasting OJ? I suppose because he is so talkative.
Yeah. He's confident. His business is growing. OJ's is receding.
But it's both positive and negative, right? Because it's shown to be this empty showmanship that he can't back up, whereas OJ can actually, he doesn't project this overconfidence, but in the end, he's the one who can actually come through.
Absolutely. In terms of who can master the creature.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that OJ is an animal wrangler. When they've casted the characters that they're going to be in this story, they could have made it just a cowboy, right? That this is happening into a ranch in the middle of nowhere. But thematically, it is about the relationship between exploitation and spectacle, right? And I think the difference between this and the other ensemble films that we've talked about, coming back to what Chaz was talking about, is rather than intercutting storyline A with storyline B, it literally has like a chunk of storyline B, the Ricky story, mainly follows storyline A. And even if it has three characters, like Angel isn't developed as a full plot line, right? Like Emerald and OJ are definitely together. We have moments of them apart. OJ is definitely the character we're kind of magnetized to for much of the point of view, but him and Emerald are working together, whose skills complement each other. Angel is part of that. Coming back to my point, they have chosen largely not to cut to Ricky's point of view until we have that middle sequence with Gordy, right? And the film has done a very good job of segmenting itself with titles, and they have chosen an extended flashback sequence, right? Which is something that some films, I wouldn't necessarily call them ensembles, but there are thrillers that do this, that rather than intercut, they will go, we are going to follow, like Glass Onion did the same thing, an extended flashback sequence, right, to build character development, because it allows you to invest in character. I don't think it's a particularly great film, but Wind River did a great kind of extended flashback sequence to kind of contextualize some stuff. They could have...
I mean, that was the best thing about that movie.
Yeah. And that is a choice, again, that like you're doing something that's ensemble-ish, because we talked about ensembles are kind of a spectrum, and that you might go, actually, we just need to explain character motivation. If we set this up well, we can flashback like they did in Nope and have the audience literally sitting there going, why am I being shown this? What does this mean? But it also does make us fully connect with Ricky, because we have seen a flashback moment of him as a terrified kid. And when we see that, we're like, oh, what the fuck is that all about? So when we see that shot repeated, and it's absolutely vital that it is a repeated shot, we are contextualizing that experience through him and seeing it through his eyes. So I think it allows us to kind of feel the character a lot more. Like it's a balloon that's about to be eaten by a monster in the sky.
But like, this film didn't need Ricky to be further developed. It chose to, and to the benefit of the film. I'm not arguing with the choice. It to me is very clearly using an ensemble to create thematic sequences. So going back to our episode that we did with Stephen Cleary, we did like plot sequences, character sequences, plot character sequences, and then what are those sequences where there isn't a plot question, there isn't a character question. The purpose of it is to make the audience go, why the fuck am I watching this? And that's what the Gordy storyline is about, right? And it's suggested to you, Stu, the exploitation of spectacle. To me, it was a combination of the interaction between humanity trying to tame nature and spectacle. Like the whole film is set in and around the business of spectacle deliberately.
Oh, and the business of exploitation of like horses, right? Are these horses being exploited or not?
And like that's the TMZ thing. That's the idea of all of the reporters arriving at the end, you know, like, and that's the idea also of projecting on us as the audience of what we consume, reality television, real life people in the tabloids. Jordan Peele's really explicitly tying all of that together.
Yeah, and representation and the design of Jean Jacket, like having like the viewfinder and, you know, Ricky calling it the viewers, right? But in a weird way, that's kind of all I have to say. Like the functions of this are very clearly tied to we need to be able to take the photo of the creature and how do we do that? And that's the kind of shit that you as a writer are going to be doing if you're doing like a thriller or a monster movie. What skills do my characters need to have? So what knowledge that they can actually act upon, right? And maybe one of them has knowledge and the other one can do it. I don't care.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this film does, is that like M has the knowledge, but they have to hire Antlers because he has the technical ability. Like even when he shows up, she's like,
Didn't I tell you this motherfucker was gonna come up here with a non-electrical camera? Let's go, boy! Yeah!
Yeah,
because he's the one who's able to like do the crank thing. Like she knows they need that, but she has no idea how to action it. But so tying it then back into our theme, do we believe that Jean Jacket / the monster is part of the ensemble? Do we believe that they count?
No, not for me.
Stu?
I think it could, right? But I think it's something coming back to this idea that part of what gives something the feel of an ensemble is that we can access the character. I don't think we can access the character of Jean Jacket. Like, what I like about Nope is I describe it as a weird fiction monster movie, right? So weird fiction is kind of like the China Miéville, slightly surreal, a little bit of a head fuck, right? And China Miéville stuff has definitely got some stuff that's head fucky, NBC Town and stuff like that. Like, if stuff is generally alien, right, how do we even communicate, right? Like, we barely recognize sentience in other mammals, yet alone species that are from another planet. So you're going to have a problem of telling stories about things whose comprehension of the universe is fundamentally different. So I think in the terms of the story, I think it could. I think it is interesting that we do cut literally inside its point of view, but it's not a point of view where we understand whether or not it has volition or agency. Well, it has agency. Clearly, it takes actions and it uses the tactics it thinks is going to work when it's going to win, which is to eat things.
It's never seemed to be presented with choices. But to me, this was a quote-unquote ensemble film almost by necessity, in that it's a monster movie, so they needed victims, and it's also a mission film, so they needed people of the different skills to pull off the mission.
The unconventionality is the structure of how it presents the ensemble.
Yes, but also, again, we go back to the Gordy line, none of that is to do with the mission, and none of that is to do with the victims, right? So it's introduced whole storylines that are there for another purpose, and that's to me what makes it feel unconventional.
Yes. Shall we move into key learnings and wrap up?
Yes, let's do it.
I might start because I usually wait for other people. Stu, I like the thing that you've said about character function that's rested with me the most is, and you contextualize it for me with our own work and our own project, but it's like you can give characters traits and attributes that make them unique and interesting, but what is it that they actually do for your story? And that's like one of those hard questions that when you get hit with it, you're just like, ah. But if you're struggling to say what they do for your story, for the narrative, it means something is missing for how they should be impacting the story in one of these big ensemble films.
You may even lean into tropes, right? Because there's like, why do we need them? Well, we see Ricky's wife, okay, in her function from a external thing, like what we need her to be there is to be a victim of the monster, right? But her function within the world to the other characters is that she is supportive. And we see these moments where she kind of like encourages Ricky.
Yeah.
And you could see that as exploitive or just her being supportive. But clearly, like, her tactic is to encourage him is her form of support. So I think for me, it's like character function, that characters don't know they're going to die. So if you're choosing a character that is going to be a victim or a suspect, don't write them to be a victim or a suspect, because that's not how they interact or navigate the world, right?
How they perceive themselves.
Yeah. You know, what's her name from The Woman King? Shanti doesn't act like she is going to die and be one of the people that we're going to feel sad who dies.
Yeah.
Right? They give her a journey, which is like, she specifically says, I no longer want to be hunted. I want to be the hunter.
And she is.
Yeah. We get to see her fulfill that. And then she fulfills it and then she dies.
So I thought that, you know, I came into this, why did each of these films add these whole other storylines that they didn't quote unquote need to add? And I was presupposing that the answer was going to be thematic, which I think it definitely is in terms of the Gordy storyline in Nope. But I genuinely didn't know why they did it in The Woman King. And, you know, where I kind of ended up was to give a range of experiences, which obviously goes to theme, but it wasn't that Nawi's storyline is every time I saw her, I was thinking, what is this movie about? It wasn't a thematic storyline. It was a very plotty, you know, deeply integrated storyline. So I think there is times, and in Riders of Justice also did the same thing, where just because you could tell a story more efficiently by giving the same functions to fewer characters, it does have an effect having more characters on screen in a story. You know, the Marcus's journey coming to terms with his grief would have taken on a very different outcome if it had just been Otto, Mathilde, and Marcus, right? It wouldn't have been where he was opened up to a large number and variety of people. Like, he was cracked open by this story in a way that a story with fewer characters could not have cracked that character open.
That story function and audience relatability.
Yeah.
I think it works on both of those axes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so contrary to the way that I normally think about things. So normally when I go in and write a script, I'm always like, how can I have fewer characters? How can I combine characteristics together? How can I make this story simpler while creating more complicated, more interesting, more robust characters, giving them more to do? And so I found this episode in particular kind of challenging one of the fundamental ways I approach my work. And Stu, like, your focus on skills, it's going to be super obvious what I'm about to say, but by taking skills away from your primary characters and giving them to other characters outside of themselves, especially multiple ones, it creates inherent conflict. It makes it harder for your main characters to achieve what it is that they're trying to achieve, whether internal or external. And it forces them to negotiate, have tactics, be in different power imbalances with other characters around them. And all of that is quite separate to I think the main thing that Mel and I have taken from this is the type of themes that you can tell using ensembles are very different. You know, these movies work because they use their ensembles to say something that a thinner movie wouldn't have been able to tell. But then just at a fundamental basic level, it's not always the right choice to combine characters and have fewer characters.
Yeah.
You, Mel, what were your key learnings?
I think, again, like, all of these episodes really demonstrated how to introduce characters in a way that every time you come back to them, every time they have long speeches, every time they interact with other characters, you can reinforce those things. But that idea of, in a feature film, that their first impression matters so much to what we know about them. And I mentioned it in Woman King, and we have that iconic scene of them rising out of the bushes. And I think in Nope, it's a little bit more thematic, but Real quick, I'll just bump on Riders of Justice as my one thing. We meet Mads, we see him on the phone, he's chatting to his wife, that's very short, but the first time we really see him interacting, he's at the hospital after his wife's died, and he's talking to this nurse, and this nurse is trying to talk him through what's about to happen, and he's like, no, I need to, see my wife, and she's like, I wouldn't advise that, and he just goes, shut up and take me to my wife. And that tells you everything. He's pragmatic. He's going to get exactly what he wants. He is out for a really specific result, and he's going to get it, and he doesn't care how he comes across to achieve his end goal. And I think, again, all of these films, when you have an ensemble, you almost have to be that pragmatic with your first character interactions. And I think all of these scripts and directions do all of that really, really well.
Yeah. We've marveled at how The Woman King was like a sprawling epic that gives access to so many different characters, but we have not talked about how it's such an awesome action movie. Like that first scene, they deliberately choose to give 4 different characters very different fighting styles so that we instantly go, oh yeah, that's the one who does the awesome spear work. Oh, and that's the one that plucks eyeballs with her fingernails. Oh,
their fighting styles, their physicality, their weapons, they're all distinct, which is so good.
A literal representation of tactics, right?
Yes.
All these films are very literal in how they present their character introductions.
Yeah. Do most films have to be literal?
I think when you're only introducing maybe 1 or 2 characters, you don't need to be quite as literal. When you're introducing 10 characters, I think you've got to be a lot more literal, a lot more to the point.
I mean, in terms of literal, to join you and Stu together there, Mel, I think they are being introduced by their function, by their skill, by their what they do in the story.
Very pragmatically.
We don't have stories, we don't have scenes which are just introducing who are they as people.
Yep.
God, that's just going to make us rewrite the opening to our film again, unless we want our character to be really good at cycling away from magpies. That's his key skill. I think for me, the mind bomb, I obviously came with a whole bunch of stuff that I'd been thinking about for the last couple of weeks. The revelation that's happened while recording, the idea that a character initiates an action when they think what they will do will win, and they do that either in response to an opening or a provocation, I think is actually a better way to think about who your protagonist is in a sequence or in your story. I'm just trying to think of the films like Bullet Train. That's an interesting film because that is very ensemble-y. So is Brad Pitt really even initiating that story? Yeah, kind of. Like he takes the MacGuffin suitcase, right? And he definitely thinks he's the best person to snatch and grab. So he does that. So I think in your scene, looking at it and going, characters only initiate action in a situation if they think that their default tactic is going to work.
Well, and it has the benefit of introducing what they think their strengths are, what their default tactic is.
Yeah, and you can use it to chart their changes, right? So if the character becomes better at diplomacy, maybe they start to use diplomacy later in the story to deal with situations that are not necessarily violent, or do they just double down in the violence?
I feel like now I've got to drop Bad Moms Christmas just because we're touching on all these films that we tossed out as suggestions as really good samples of ensembles that didn't have to be ensembles. And Bad Moms Christmas was like second runner up.
You just want to.
I just needed to name check it because I think it does that really well, right? You've got these 6 women and the way that they're introduced, and they're all archetypes, and they're all these slightly larger than life things, and they're, yeah, it's a good sample.
And actually coming back to what you said about the characters, if they've got no other choice. So I think that is in response to a provocation. You need to act because otherwise I will hurt you, right? Figuratively or literally, right? So you're going to choose the tactic that you think is your best tactic, your best skill, right?
Well, you're talking about that moment in Riders of Justice where Leonard runs out into the fields and pulls down his pants.
Yeah. Yeah, talk about fuck. Yes.
The first time I saw that, I was like, he's doing this because he knows that's the thing that will actually stop Mads from beating him up. Second time around, I'm like, oh, fuck, he's like reliving his trauma of his abuse.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, God, he thinks it's going to stop him, but actually it's not.
And now I'm kind of with you, Mel, where I think it's both.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about ensembles, right? Is that when you have so many multiple dynamics, you open yourself up to the ability to even more so explore, say, it's all of the above. And you can sort of move on. Where if it's a two-hander, you almost have to confront certain things a little bit more directly, or you have to resolve them. And with an ensemble, sometimes you get to have your cake and eat it too.
I think my final thing that I just want to drop here is these films are amazing because they take time not just to quote-unquote service multiple storylines, but then to take those secondary characters that are the mentor character or the confidant or the truth-sayer, and then give them separate scenes with other characters, you know, to give them a life of their own, to give them wants and needs, to give them...
They pay really good attention to how they allocate all of that, particularly the Woman King, but all of them.
You are 100% going to have to draw up your little character web for the Woman King, and we'll put it on the Instagram and the Patreon and all that shit.
Yes.
Who's the you in that sentence?
You.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, you just volunteered yourself. Amazing.
Thanks, Chaz. Visual aids.
Speaking of AIDS, as in AIDS, I'd like to thank all the Patreons who make more Draft Zero more often.
Entirely possible
Entirely possible at this point. In particular, we'd like to thank our top tier Patreons. These people give a lot of money per episode to help you get more Draft Zero more often, and it's definitely more Draft Zero, as our last series can attest. Especially Alexander, Casimir, Eduardo, Jennifer, Thomas, Garrett, Randy, Jesse, Sandra, Thies, Alex, and Krob.
He gave us a pronunciation guide. He said the first syllable of thesis.
Yeah, isn't that Thies?
Yes. Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Yeah, I know I did. I practiced to embarrass you. Because how did you used to say it, Chaz? We should just do a supercut.
Tase.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mel and Stu. This has felt like in true Draft Zero style that it got well out of hand.
It did. Well, I remember you saying, hey, how about a third film? And I threw out a bunch, and then I went and saw The Woman King because we definitely need to do this. And suddenly we went from 4 films to 9. So, you know.
For sure. But all that said, and I hope this is the same for our listeners, but I have actually got a lot of different learnings from rewatching most of these films through this.
For sure.
It goes both for my philosophy behind Draft Zero and writing an ensemble. Quantity has a quality of its very own.
That's a great tagline. Put it on my tombstone.
Your tombstone is going to be very full, Mel. There's a lot of things you want on your tombstone.
I hope it's very large.
Mine is like, grateful to not have to wake up is going to be on my tombstone.
I hope you all feel like arguing with either Stu or myself
about anything on this episode or anything in general.
And you can find many ways of getting in touch with us at our website at draft-zero.com.
At the website, you'll also find the show notes for this and all our other episodes,
as well as links to support us and spread the word for free via a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
Very important for spreading the word.
Or if you think that what we do here is worth $1 or preferably more than $1, then you can also find links to our Patreon page to support us getting these episodes to you quicker. Thanks.
And thanks for listening.
Hi, boys and cowgirls. It's time to ride off into the sunset. That's right. Happy trail. Closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Come back again. And until then, we wish you well. Hasta la vista. Adios.